Hiya, my name's Savannah Marshall and you're watching Sport and Icons.
Now, should women do 3-minute rounds opposed to their current 2-minute rounds? Should they do 12 rounds in championship fights like the men do rather than their 10? In championship fights, women will do a maximum 20 minutes. Men will do 36 minutes. So there's a 16-minute gap between a man and a woman in championship fights. Now, before you answer that question, let me get across a couple of points first, which may change your mind from your initial yes or no answer. Now, firstly, this all came about, of course, listen, it's been a talking point for quite some time, but I suppose more highlighted recently when Amanda Serrano said to Katie Taylor, listen, we're already creating an historic event. You and us fighting at Madison Square Garden as a headliner, that's historic enough. Let's do it a little bit extra. Let's do 3-minute rounds, like the men. Katie Taylor, of course, didn't seem too up for it. In fact, did she bottle it? In some ways, you could say that. But at the same time, there's a method behind it as well. Women's boxing isn't as high as certainly women would like it. That's for sure. And they are starting to climb the ladder now. They are starting to get more respect than they ever did. And the reason being is because there's been quite a few fights where people have watched it and actually forgot that there's actually two women who are boxing. As much as people say, forget that they're women, forget that they're men, it's just boxing. Well, it's always going to be ingrained in people. Well, that's men boxing and that's women boxing. Women are boxing 2-minute rounds. Men are boxing 3-minute rounds. Men are doing 12-round fights for championship fights. Women are doing 10 rounds. There's a huge gap of 16 minutes. But there's been quite a few fights of the year involving women. There has been. And I think the reason why, for example, people probably enjoyed the Katie Taylor versus Delphine Pursuit fights, for example, or the Terri Harper, Natasha Jonas, and quite a few others, because they're only doing 2 minutes. So they haven't got to pace themselves as much as men. If they have to do 3-minute rounds, and 12 of them as well, that's extra time, which means they're going to be pacing themselves a whole lot more, which of course is going to make people go, well, it's not as exciting, is it? Whereas if you're doing 2-minute rounds across a maximum 10, then that's a far shorter window where they haven't got to conserve as much energy as, say, a man would. So that's why a lot of them will start thumping lumps out of each other. That's why you will see that many women, like, say, for example, a Ebanie Bridges versus Shannon Courtney, why that fight was pretty good is because they were letting their hands go, because they didn't have to pace themselves as much. 2 minutes, don't get me wrong, if you're actually in the ring, 2 minutes will probably feel like an eternity, especially when you do start to get tired. But you don't have to pace yourself as much. So therefore, the quality would probably deplete if they were doing 3-minute rounds. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly. Hopefully you understand what it is I'm trying to get at. Of course, the other way of looking at it is people will argue with the fact that, of course, women, they want equal pay as the men when it comes to boxing. And rightfully so. I don't think anybody should disagree with that. But again, that's not because they're doing 2-minute rounds. And it's not a fair argument to say, well, you do 2-minute rounds and you only do 10. So you do 20 minutes worth, whereas a man will do 36 minutes worth. So a man should get paid more. Well, as anything in life, it should be down to, well, what's your profile? Who's willing to watch you? How many tickets have you sold? What about your pay-per-views? What about your viewerships? All these things have to be taken into account to say whether or not you should get the same as a man. And you should get the same as a man. So, for example, if, for example, Katie Taylor, just one example, or a Chantelle Cameron or whoever it is, there's a fight and she sells 10,000 tickets in the arena. And say, for example, Derek Chisora sells 10,000 tickets in an arena. Well, surely they should get paid the same. Yes? Because they're selling the same. If they're doing very similar at the gate, if they're doing very similar on TV viewers, whether it be pay-per-view or regular terrestrial TV, if they're doing the same, then yes, they should get the same amount of money. Of course, sponsorships aside. Of course, sponsorships just top up all their wages. So yes, they should get paid the same. And it should make no difference whether you're doing a 2-minute round, 3-minute round, 5-minute round, or just one constant slugfest. It should make no difference. You should get paid your value of what you bring to the event. That's how it should be. Now, is there a huge gap between the men and the women and the pay? Probably, and there probably is a gap because of that very reason. People want to watch men box more than they do women. And that's the unfortunate reality of it. I mean, for me, I like watching both. I do really enjoy watching many of the women's fights. But again, maybe I enjoy watching them because they're a lot more action-packed, predominantly, than men. Because they haven't got to pace themselves as much. Now, Beck Conley, she was the first woman here in the UK to do 3-minute rounds, to my knowledge. But that was on her professional debut, I believe, and she's done 2-minute rounds ever since. Is there a reason why women do 2-minute rounds? Is it something to do with their genetics? I don't know. Is it something to do with their endurance? Is it as in an average, of course? Of course, each person will be different to the other. Of course, we understand that. But is it because they have different genetics to a man? Whereas, I suppose the average man is stronger than the average woman. Of course, there's going to be exceptions to every rule. Of course there is. Some men will maybe have better endurance than a woman, as an average. I mean, is that why they do it? Is it because, obviously, internally, there's far more risk for a woman? Obviously, they've got a womb and things like that. Obviously, they have periods and all these kind of things. And maybe things can be increased with the increased chances of, I don't know, breast cancer if they get hit in the breast. And, all these kind of things. I don't know, okay, I'm just putting a finger in the air, in the wind and that, I suppose. But is there a reason for it? Is there a reason why? In UFC, in MMA, do the men and the women, do they do the same amount of rounds? The same amount of minutes? Again, I don't know. That's something I haven't really thought about before until literally right now. Do they do the same? But again, I suppose ultimately it should be down to the fans to decide, and it should of course ultimately come down to the safety and that as well, depending on the reasons as to why it's a 2-minute round, not a 3-minute round. And a lot of things should be factored. Do women want to do 3-minute rounds? Ultimately, if you can get away with doing 2-minute rounds across 10 rounds, as opposed to doing 3-minute rounds across 12, and if you're selling the same amount of tickets and you're making the same amount of money as a man, why would you want to change it? Doesn't make too much sense. Maybe Amanda Serrano said this to Katie Taylor, knowing full well that Katie Taylor wasn't going to have it. Meaning that maybe Amanda Serrano doesn't want to do 3-minute rounds either. Because she wasn't arguing the point too much when Katie Taylor was saying, no, I don't think it's really a good idea and he doesn't need it. And it's true. It's true. I mean, this event is going to do however well it's going to do, or not as well, I don't know, based on the fact it's Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. Whether it's 3-minute rounds isn't going to increase their purses. Why do extra work for the same amount of money? It's not very productive. But anyway, listen, some of you may have a different viewpoint on all that, and of course I fully understand it. I mean, where does it stop? Men fight topless. Should women? Yeah. Anyway, drop your thoughts below, click thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video.